Hello, and welcome to a very special edition of Three Girls, where we are not going to be talking about any tarot decks for a change. And instead, we are going to have a discussion about a book that we all read. This came actually from another live that we did, and it was a recommendation in the comments. I think it was just a throwaway, I'd love to see you girls talk about a book. And we latched onto it like the book lovers that we are. Literally straight away, we're like, let's do this. What book should we talk about? What are we doing? Picked a book that we all thought sounded like our kind of shared thing. Read it, and here we are. So the book that we're going to be talking about, in case you haven't guessed from the title, is Nettle and Bone. And this is by T. Kingfisher. It's a fantasy book. And just to give a very brief overview of the book, this is the story of Mara, who is the youngest child, the youngest of three girls to a royal family. She's a princess. And they live in a very small kingdom that has two other kingdoms on either side that are much bigger. And in order to protect themselves, the eldest daughter is married off to the prince of one of these kingdoms, and she dies in a very strange accident. She falls down the stairs and she dies. And so the middle sister is then married off to this prince, and Mara is sent off to live in a convent because the prince doesn't want Mara to marry or have children before he has children, in case something happens to her middle sister and he needs to marry her instead. And Mara's sister falls pregnant. She goes along for the birth of the child, and she discovers that the prince is abusing her sister. And so she goes on this journey to rescue her sister from the prince, is the basic overview of the book. Have I missed anything at all?
Not really. That's the setup for sure.
Cool. Okay, so I think what we're going to do is we've got a few things that we want to talk about. We're going to go round. We've rolled dice like we always do, because if we had to make a decision, they would never happen. And I think we're just going to start by a very, very brief overview of how we felt about the book, how we would rate it on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being I absolutely loved it, 1 being this was a pile of shit, why did you make me read it? And we'll just go from there, really. So I think Julie's going to go first.
Okay, if I were to rate this book, I would probably rate it like a 3.75. Can I do that? Like quarter stars?
Yeah, of course you can.
3.7.
Not only Goodreads, but we're not Goodreads, so you can do that if you like.
So I liked the story. I think it had a lot of merits. I didn't love the story. It didn't really blow my hair back. I think maybe my expectations of it were higher because I knew it won a Hugo Award. And so I was like, oh, this is going to be really epic and amazing. And so it wasn't as exciting and intense as I thought it would be of a story. And that's fine. I mean, there's still some things that I enjoyed about it, but I would say I didn't love it. I liked it. I enjoyed it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So if I was going to rate it, I would probably give it a 3.5. And same thing, actually. There was a lot I liked about it, but there were also some things for me that just didn't work and kind of let it down a little bit. Mm-hmm. And again, I think there may be some of that, maybe my expectations going into the book were not met in the way that I was hoping. I like T. Kingfisher. This isn't the first book that I've read by T. Kingfisher. I have also read What Moves the Dead, which I really enjoyed. And so I was expecting to like it. I was just expecting to like it a little bit more than I did. And there are some things that I didn't enjoy as much, which we'll get into when we talk about different parts of the book and stuff.
Sarah.
So I actually really loved the book. I mean, on Goodreads I gave it 5 stars. Obviously, you can't give it partial stars on Goodreads. So I mean, it probably in reality would be more like a 4.5 because obviously, like I don't think it's a perfect book by any means, but just like thematically from a character standpoint, I really enjoyed what this book had going on. I mean, it was basically like it was a fairy tale, but approached in a different way. And I loved that, it was like all of the sort of like villain characters, the normal villain characters in a fairy tale, sort like, the witch and the evil fairy that comes to the christening, and the princess's sister, like all kind of get together and go on this quest to actually try to rescue someone. Like, so it was a twist on a lot of what is traditional fairy tale tropes, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. I thought that all of the characters were really appealing, and I just thoroughly enjoyed the story. I thought it was quite clever, and there were just a lot of things that I really liked about it. Like, it was definitely a sort of it was cozy. Like, it was, it obviously wasn't a big sort of epic story, but it was just a really like human story about a group of normally overlooked characters getting together to rescue someone. It was fun. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it, and I thought it was pretty, it was pretty clear-eyed about like, even in this fantasy magical setting, like about where the world is unjust and where things can go wrong for people. So yeah.
Cool. And did you physically read it, Sarah, or did you audio read it?
I read it on ebook. So I read like everything on my Kindle basically. So that is my deal. So
okay. So I physically read, and then Marlena is saying she did half audio. So I wonder how the audio was.
It was, yeah.
You moved to physical because the audio sucked,
or do you just like to flip?
Yeah, adapting. Okay, cool.
So what, I guess, like, start with the negative, because that's always fun. So what was your least favorite things about the book? Like, maybe not necessarily character or world building or plot, because we'll come to those more specifically as we go on, but just like generally, what kind of things in the book did you not like, if any, Sarah, for you?
Well, there were, I mean, I had some.
Okay, so if we're not going to get into like this, I'm trying to think generally. I would say pacing probably was an issue for me, because it started off to me with just a fantastic first chapter. We were right in there, right in the thick of things with her trying to fulfill one of a few tasks that was set upon her to do, and it was a fantastic task. And it was just really just engaging. It grabbed my attention immediately. So I just really loved that out of the gate. But then you had to backtrack to more the beginning of the story to get more of the exposition as to why she is in, why she is in the circumstances she is in. And while I understand that had to happen, of course, so that the reader understood the circumstances, it then lost its momentum for me. So that was like one of the things where I felt like it kind of went backwards. So I was really ready to go, and then we had to slow down, and then it almost feel like it never quite ramped back up. I mean, I felt, so I think it was just kind of like there were, and of course there were several moments where it was once again engaging, but then intermingled with that, just a lot of, okay, we're on the road again. Which actually is very kind of nostalgic for me in terms of other fantasy novels I've read, like series where it's a quest. And so a lot of times they're just freaking traveling. That's all they're doing, So that like wasn't necessarily too troublesome, but I think on the whole, just because of that first chapter, it really set an expectation for me in terms of like maybe how the pacing would be and just how the kind of ramped up tension and momentum would be. And that didn't necessarily play out for me throughout the rest of the book, if that makes sense. So that would be one thing. And I'm trying to think of other like, I would say Mara was maybe one of the least engaging characters for me. I didn't dislike her. I thought she was fine. But I think that's very interesting, right? Because she is the protagonist. But I would say that out of all the characters, and I loved so many in that book, she was just like, oh, whatever. She's carrying us along. It is her story in a sense. But yeah, I was, I guess, the least engaged by her, and way more engaged by the other characters in the story. So I'll just leave it at that. We'll get into other stuff, I'm sure.
I totally agree about Mara, and I also agree with what Marlena and Laura are saying as well. That was one of the big issues for me with this book, is that if I hadn't been told I was reading the perspective of a 30-year-old woman, I would never have believed it. Like, even taking into account that she was very sheltered and very cloistered and very naive, she didn't read like a naive 30-year-old. She read like a very young adult at most for me. But some of the things I really like, there was some little things that I didn't like they didn't necessarily spoil the book for me, but I was disappointed. So one of the big selling points on the back of the book is the demon chicken, which was a complete waste of time. It didn't do anything. You could have literally taken the demon chicken out of the book and had exactly the same story, just slightly rewrite the end a little bit, and it wouldn't have made any difference. My expectations of having a demon chicken in your story are obviously much higher if you're going to use it as a selling point in your synopsis. Then the chicken needs to do more than just lay an egg every now and again and then do a little bit at the end. I thought it was such a waste of what could have been a really good plot point. There were other things I didn't like I really didn't like the woman and the puppet. I thought that, again, that was just boring. I didn't really care. And even though it was only at the very end, it still really spoiled it for me. I did not want there to be a romance. I didn't think it was necessary. I didn't think it was believable. I enjoyed the whole found family, platonic love relationship that they were building up. And I think by squeezing a little hints of romance in it at the end, that was a real letdown for me. I didn't enjoy that at all. So there were a few things I didn't really like.
Interesting, because I hadn't thought about that with the demon chicken. Because I like the demon chicken. I thought he was a good time, but I guess I can see that there could have been more that he could have done, I suppose. So I hadn't thought about it that way. And I guess with Fenris, is it Fenris and Mara? I actually, normally I'm like romance all the way. And I would say that this one was actually understated, which, and in a fairy tale, that's like one of the biggest selling things. And so I still liked it, and I actually liked that it was understated. So that for me was, I didn't mind that. And actually, the more I think about it, if you had said that there wasn't going to be a romance in there, if it turned out that there wasn't a romance in there, I think I would have been okay with that too, actually. But yeah, it's very interesting. Okay, Laura's saying, "Oh my God, the woman and the puppet." I forgot about that. Yeah, there's some weird comments in there. Yeah.
Yeah, it just felt really out of place to me, especially the direction that it went in as well. It felt odd. It did, so I didn't love it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like the woman in the puppet was probably like, that was a plot point that didn't need to be there. Like that. I mean, there was like, I didn't understand the reason for that in particular.
Mm-hmm.
And so I hear what Laura's saying about how, in the context of the overall theme of the book, like, you know, that part, you know, could definitely be seen as a little bit off. And yeah, that was just sort of a random side, like it was just a side thing. Like it didn't actually like add anything to the overall story.
I think oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the way I saw that, I totally agree. I didn't think it really added all that much or needed to be there. And that I thought maybe at the very least, it's just like one of the very many ways in which expectations are upset, because you would think that, was it what Miss Margaret would want to be rid of the cursed child demon puppet who is constantly about ready to strangle her or whatever. But then it turns out that actually, you know, when given the opportunity to do so, she doesn't want to do it. You know, she chooses to, and while that's problematic, it's just one of the many, again, examples where we see expectations just kind of upturned and upset. And also, yeah, I didn't really think it needed to be in there at all. So yeah, weird. It was just weird.
It was weird. It was weird. But
it was weird. So, Sarah, things you did not care for.
So I guess that was one thing. You know, I personally, I loved the demon chicken. I loved the animal bits. Like, I think that the way that T. Kingfisher writes animal behavior is quite funny and engaging, and it was very amusing to me that you had these two like wildly magical, a dog made out of bones and a chicken that has a demon in it, but they were still mostly just acting like a dog and a chicken. Like I enjoyed that. Like it made the world feel more lived in, you know, so I really enjoyed that aspect of it. So other things that I didn't like, I do get the criticism of the pacing at the very beginning, because yeah, like it starts out in the blistered lands and like she's building this dog out of bones, and like that it you know, it's fully like in medias res, like you start right out in the middle of things. And I do agree that when it got to the second chapter and it immediately backtracked to like explaining her whole family background, I had a moment of being like, you know, like, because it did, like, but I was only feeling like that for like a couple paragraphs, basically, you know, because it like goes all the way back to her childhood and explaining her relationships with her sisters, and I was just like, okay. But generally speaking, you know, with the pacing, one of my favorite quotes that I picked out of the book was she wondered if all the old stories of heroes slaying monsters and maidens locked in towers had involved long, tedious stretches of trying to find the monsters or build the towers in the first place. Probably, no, almost certainly. Who wants to hear the dull practical bits? Me, I do. It would make me feel less like I'm failing. And like that was one of my favorite quotes from the book, because again, it just sort of reminds you that for a person who is in that sort of like fairy tale quest setting, what would it actually feel like? You know, like what would that experience actually entail? You know, and I think to other like, you know, grand quest stories, like they always leave out a whole bunch of putting one foot in front of the other, you know, and that aspect of it, I really felt like added to the character, and it again added to the kind of lived in feel of the world, where it's like real people are actually having these experiences, and that like they're really trying to figure out, like, in the context of this magical crazy world where you have witches and godmothers and all this stuff, like they still have to figure out like the, you know, the nitty gritty of how the heck do we get into this catacombs, and like how to, you know, how do we actually handle this terrible situation. And so I did really like that aspect of it, even though, you know, I can understand that it might feel a little bit a little bit tedious, as you're sort of going through it. But like in terms of other things I didn't like, not to get down to like a very specific plot point or anything, but the one thing that I was really annoyed with was how obvious it was that the tapestry was going to be the thing that got them through the catacombs. Like she gets this tapestry and keeps insisting over and over again, well, it's not a map. It doesn't look like a map. How could it be a map? It's not a map. And then they tried to explain through this sort of like explanation of like weaving how it in fact wasn't a map, but it still was a map or something. And like that I was just like, oh, come on. We all knew, like 30 seconds after she got the stupid tapestry.
Exactly.
Like we all knew, like
exactly.
that. Nobody was fooled by that.
Exactly.
So that to me was like the most stupid plot point that just like made me mad while I was reading it. I was like, oh, come on, like we all know what this is gonna be.
Very obvious.
So I did like the romance because I felt like it was quite subtly done, and it did show like how they really came to actually like rely on each other in a lot of ways, like in a very, very like slow burn way over like most of the book, so I did really like that aspect of it. I'm trying to think of more things that I didn't care for. Maybe we could just go on to the next topic and I'll let Heather continue. So
you don't have to force it either. If you liked
if you liked it, you liked it. It's good if you don't have anything. It's fine. Totally fine. I have to say, actually, interestingly, on a like side note that would have come up later anyway, but I actually liked the pacing. I thought it was paced really well. And am I back? Did I go? Am I back?
You're kind of going in and out a little bit.
Going in and out, yeah.
My network's my internet's a bit rubbish, I think. Can you hear me?
Okay. I think you seem back now. You seem back now. Yeah.
Okay. So
you're back and you're synced.
I actually liked the pacing. I thought it went really well. I liked that it started with a bang and then it slowed us right down and took us like through it all slowly. I really enjoyed that. There was never a moment, I have to say, I was bored or was like, oh, like this is dragging or this bit's going too quickly. I thought it was paced really well, personally.
And you like that, though. I think in general, you have said you love the kind of slow burn. You love the kind of build of things because you read a shit ton of Stephen King. And if that's not, I don't know what is. So that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
So, which leads nicely into the things that we liked the most about it. Again, like we'll come back to character and plot and world building, but if that's part of your answer, that's also fine.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, there are many things I loved about it. I loved in general that this is, all these fairy tale tropes that are once again upended, they subvert expectations. I mean, you've got the protagonist who's a princess, but she's 30 and she's not, beautiful and she's not, she's not round. She's a nun. She's a nun. And then, you've got the dust wife who she's not like the wicked witch and the fairy godmother who's normally, in the fairy tale, she's, this positive character full of many blessings. But this fairy godmother, she's better at curses, and then Fenris, who is the knight in shining armor. He's the one that needs to be saved. And he actually commits murder. I mean, he's got reasons, but ultimately he ends up committing murder, which is not the most chivalrous thing. And he ends up getting enslaved in a goblin market, and he's the one that needs saving. So just things like that. And then of course, the Prince Charming is anything but. So I feel like that's what I enjoyed most, the various ways in which all of these kind of predictable fairy tale tropes are upset, and you just get just a richer, tapestry of characters and characters that you would normally pigeonhole in a certain way. They completely upset expectations. And so that was the most fun thing for me. And then, yeah, so you have this group of misfits essentially like on this quest to like murder the prince. Like that's amazing. That's freaking amazing. So I really enjoyed that. And I also, yeah, and I love the animals. I did. I love Demon Chicken. I loved Bone Dog. I loved Bone Dog so much. And yeah, just I loved T. Kingfisher. The writing style. I really loved the writing style and the narrative style. I think she's just a great writer. So just fluid narrative style. And I think that's really it. Like on the whole, I just, as someone who reads fairy tale, loves fairy tale reimaginings and retellings, this was such a different take on that I just really, really enjoyed. So, yeah.
My answers are very similar, actually. I really liked it felt like a Wizard of Oz retelling almost. And I really enjoyed that. The overall plot, I actually really enjoyed. I love quest stories anyway. And I think this one was executed well, the quest part. I liked the pacing. Again, I thought that was really good. I love T. Kingfisher's writing. I think she has a really simple, easy, flowing writing style that's just so easy and lovely to read. It doesn't take a lot of effort, which I think is really, really nice. I love the found family. Found family is one of my favorite tropes in fantasy, but just in general. And so I really loved that. And I loved Finder and Bone Dog. I didn't dislike the Demon Chicken. I was just really disappointed that more wasn't done with it. If you're going to use it as part of your synopsis, do something with it. But I did. There were a lot of things I did actually really enjoy.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Laura is saying, loved Dustwife and Godmothers. Yes, absolutely.
Yes,
that duo. I mean, two of my favorite characters for sure. Absolutely. Love them so very much.
Agnes was so great. Like it was just so, because she was just such a nice person who could curse people, and like her whole story about how she had practiced, cursing, and blessing when she was a kid, and had, tried blessing the mice, and then it was like overrun with mice, it was just, I don't know. I found the whole concept of I don't know. I thought that the magic in the book was not overly explained, but it was explained in a way that was fun, like the Dustwife, her power is she can talk to dead people, and that comes into play in multiple different ways throughout the book. And then Agnes, she can only do one kind of blessing, but can do basically any kind of curse you want. And she's so nice that she would never. I thoroughly enjoyed her as a character because of that. And I love that those two ended up going off and having their prickly friendship, continue living together, which I really, really enjoyed that. So yeah, as an ensemble cast, there were no characters that I felt like were superfluous or didn't add anything, or they were all really well drawn. They were all really just enjoyable people to spend time with. I also am a huge fan of found family type narratives, and this one just really nailed that entire dynamic. And it was, there was a lot of humor to it, and there was just a lot of I don't know, it was a very warm, cozy read to me. It just made me really happy for all of these misfits to be together. And yes, they were trying to do something that was really terrifying and difficult. But they just, it was that aspect of the book I really, really loved. So yeah, I guess I'll probably just leave it at that. I feel like I've just kind of reiterated what you guys said, but maybe those aspects of it like meant more to me just because like like that those were the things that made me really like love the book, like really feel like I loved the book. So yeah.
There's one thing I did like, and I also found it interesting, is that it had a really cozy feel. But in terms of what I would normally describe as a cozy fantasy, it actually wasn't. Like, a cozy fantasy is normally is very slice of life, very low stakes, very fluffy and light. This is actually where, like, on the surface it's like that, but this is a book about abuse, and then you've got like the blighted lands where people were so hungry they were eating human flesh and they were cursed by God, and you've got the drowned boy. You've got some really, really seriously dark moments in it that all feel very light and fluffy almost because of this cozy vibe it's got going on. And I actually think that was something she did really, really well as an author, was combining those dark elements with that cozy feel. I liked that.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
Should we go into world building? Because there's like Marlena's asking about the magic system, which I think fits into the whole world building kind of thing in general.
The world building was fine for me. I will say maybe where I found it just a little bit problematic, but I guess I could make allowances for it. Was just the fact that Mara, she set on these, the Dustwife sets her up on these tasks that are essentially meant to be completely impossible, and yet she is able to complete these impossible tasks essentially, and there's really no explanation as to how or why. She's able to, and so as a reader, I'm jumping to these conclusions of like, okay, she's got some magical ability. We're going to find, like, there's going to be some more explained as to like how she is able to in fact do these very things that the Dustwife says are impossible, and that's why she told her to do them, because she knew they're going to be impossible, and then she wouldn't have to go and help Mara with her request. But then at the same time, then you find out that Agnes, who is the fairy godmother, is in fact Mara's Mara's aunt? Great aunt? She's a family member.
Like her half great aunt, because
she's a family member. So it kind of like runs in the family, I feel. So that was just the way I kind of explained it to myself. Like, oh, okay, it's just so it runs in the family. But it's one of these threads where it's like, oh, I could have seen more, I could have seen more done with that, just because it was a fascinating part of her character. So it was one of those things where I was like wanting more. And once again, I made explanations in my head and as to, okay, why we are presented with this, which is just magical and beautiful and fantastic, but we don't really get any explanation. But really, other than that, I felt like, again, as we were talking about before, because the vibe of it was just so, it wasn't tense, and that's the very thing. Like, and that's, to my era, what I was probably expecting in the beginning, that it was going to be like, because that this quest is quite serious in nature. I mean, they're on a quest to save the sister, kill the prince, and so but yet that's not what it was at all. And so the fact that the magic element, that to me was okay. I guess I really didn't think much about that, other than the whole like Mara with her tasks and everything. Yeah, I just kind of, I don't know. I think because the characters were just so well drawn for me, and these abilities of theirs were just, I felt like they were just natural facets, and I didn't really question it, I guess. So Yeah, I don't like. Yeah, I would have loved to have seen more of the goblin market. So there are things that were introduced where I think I would have these magical elements, or the world building where I would have loved maybe more, but there wasn't. And so, and so then again, maybe that's what for me lent to it being a little slower in the pacing because I was expecting more and more intensity because, geez, the goblin market is like what an intense place and everything. And yeah, so yeah, it was all right. I guess it was all right. Like I didn't have like too much of a problem. Like after I realized, oh, this is going to be one of those like, it's not going to be like a wham bam. It's going to be just very kind of a lower vibe. Like I don't know, like a calmer. It felt very like a calmer vibe. I guess I don't know how to explain it, but yeah.
See, the world building for me was the thing that was most lacking, and probably the thing that pulled my enjoyment of the book the most down. I really like world building. It's one of my favorite things in a fantasy novel is good world building. I wanted so much more than this book gave us. And I know it wasn't like this was a very plot character driven story, but it was a plot character driven story where they were making their journey across the country. And I had no sense of this country really that they were traveling along. Like I didn't really, by the end of it, feel like I knew the difference between the North and the South, or we had like a glimpse of the Blighted Lands or a glimpse of the Goblin Market, but I couldn't tell you anything. I couldn't find a place in this world in order for it to make sense to me. Mm-hmm. And so I found that really pulled my rating down because I'm willing to accept anything in a world if I can understand why it exists in that world, but I just didn't feel like I knew the world well enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree that like I would have loved, like you said, the Blighted Land. I mean, like again, some of these things that are introduced, I would have loved more of for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, or just to understand them a bit better. Like there's a whole thing about, how God cursed these people. And I'm like, I don't want you to pause your book to give me a history of the religion in the world that we're in. But I would just like some understanding. Like if you're gonna bring it up, I just want to have some understanding of it so that I can get my head around like how it works in book. And also, I'm a sucker for a good magic system. And I don't think everybody needs to be writing Brandon Sanderson level magic. I'm not like that crazy, but I just would have liked to see A, more magic, and B, just have a slightly steadier foothold in understanding how the magic worked or why it worked or what it was capable of or something. It was just like it almost felt just like I want some magic to happen now, so this character is gonna do this thing. I'm like, okay, fab. Why? How? Like, so I don't know. It was the bit I was probably the most disappointed with, was like I just couldn't get my grounding in the world, and I really wanted to. And I think if I had just a little bit more of a picture of the world it was taking place in, some of the other stuff would have worked better for me personally.
Yeah, so none of that bothered me. And the reason why is because I didn't read this as a epic fantasy. I read this as a fairy tale. And fairy tales don't tend to have a lot of world building, and they don't tend to have a lot of explanation for the magic that happens. It's a fairy tale. And I don't tend to like, there are ways to me sometimes in which over explaining can kind of take the magic away in a certain way. Like if things can be left subtle and they can be left unexplained, because in real life they're not always like not everything is always explained. We don't always understand the reason for everything. We don't always understand the reason why things exist. For me, the initial magical tasks that Mara did, I mean, for starters, the weaving the cloak didn't actually take any magic. It just took determination, and fundamentally, like, that was the main thing that making Bone Dog took too. Like, it took determination with no guarantee that like she spent all that time in the blistered land finding all the bones and wiring together a dog skeleton, and with no guarantee that it was even going to work at the end. And then it did work, and she couldn't believe it. And then he ran away, right at the beginning, and so to me, like it was and that's the reason why the Dust Wife eventually didn't make her do the third task. It's because like she had proven at that point that she wasn't going to give up, and like she was actually going to accomplish these things because that's how much it meant to her to be able to kill the prince and save her sister. And so, so I guess that aspect of it didn't really bother me. I guess I just kind of didn't need an explanation as to why, like, bones in the blistered land might come back to life, or Mara might have the ability to do that. And same thing with some of the settings as well. Like the Goblin Market was amazing, and it would have been amazing to spend more time there. But it also, like, I don't know. This also just might have to do with just sometimes like my preferences in a book. Like not everything needs to be explained, because sometimes it's just vibes, like I don't know if either of you guys have ever read any like Kelly Link or anything like that. But there are, like if you read a Kelly Link story, I love Kelly Link. She's one of my favorite like fantasy authors. But if you read a Kelly Link story, nothing will be explained. Like you won't understand why anything's happening. Like, but it's vibes, like it's just vibes, and you feel like you're in a magical place, and you feel like, even though you don't understand necessarily what's happening, it feels magical. And so, and I can be okay with that. Like I can actually really enjoy just, this might be just because I'm a Pisces, but I can really enjoy just living in vibes, like I'm not an air sign. I don't need to have explanations for everything. But again, I mean, that's just me. Like, that's just how I'm able to function, like in a book, and it's fine. But for obviously that's not true for everybody. Like it's, sometimes it's just like, yeah, this doesn't make any sense. What the F, and like, and I totally get that feeling too. So, so this book just felt more, again, it's a fairy tale. And like when you're going on a fairy tale quest, like shit happens, and it's like, well, why did this happen? And you don't always necessarily get an explanation for why. And I guess it just that aspect of it didn't really bother me. And same thing with like the magical systems. I mean, it was, again, for fairy tale purposes, it was basically enough to know, that the Dust Wife can talk to dead people, and a fairy godmother can give blessings and curses to babies. And like, I was like, cool, that's all I need to know, because like, that's what you get in a fairy tale too. Like that's, that's the same level of explanation you get. So, so that, and that's not to say that I don't love when there is really good world building in a novel, and I don't love when there's a really like, I just read Babel, for example, that has like some of the most like defined magical system that I've like ever read, because it was like specifically this magical system around translation of language, and it fully explained like how the whole thing worked, and I loved that. But for this book I didn't need it, because it felt like a fairy tale and not like a, it just didn't need to be as fully realized as a world, I guess, for me to enjoy it. So yeah, that's I guess, my opinion on the world building. Although I do think that it would have been cool if we could have just spent more time in some of those places. Like, the Goblin Market was like the coolest. I mean, it was such a cool setting, but I don't need to know why like a bird guy, can play an instrument and dance teeth out of people's heads, like it, just tell me that the bird guy exists. And I'm like, cool, bird guy, bone dancer or tooth dancer, plays a flute and teeth come out. Like, oh, sure, whatever. Like, that's super creepy and I love it. Like, I don't know. So yeah, I think it might just be an easier thing for me to just like let shit happen and wash over me, and I'm like fine with it. So
oh yeah, I agree. Like I didn't really question like the shit that happened in the Goblin Market, and how this guy could make teeth dance, and why Dust Wife is a necromancer, like why, that kind of the
saint with the severed hand. I'm like, I don't even know.
Yeah,
that's a creepy image. It's cool. I like it. Cool. I don't need to know anything else. Like,
I mean, that I agree. I just kind of took it as, well, so this is a fairy tale, setting, and so this this stuff is okay. And I just took that as it was, and that was fine. I think, yeah, I really do think my only sticking point was freaking Bone Dog. Like the fact that to me there was something there, you know, Mara, yes, sheer determination, absolutely. That was the defining, that was the pivotal factor in why the Dust Wife ultimately decides to help her. And freaking Bone Dog comes to life not once, but twice. And to me, it's just, that was the one place where I'm like, and again, I was basically just excusing it in my head as like, well, great aunt is Agnes is, she's fairy godmother, so Mara's special, I guess, but it was just that little thing right there where I was like, wow, this could be a nice moment for a little more.
Mm-hmm.
That was the one time where my air sign was like, but I need to know. Why?
Can you explain the logic here, please?
I need to know. Dog, like, because yes, the sheer grit and determination for her to collect, and like her hands are already just jacked from having to make the cloak, and it was just, that scene in general was just fantastic. It was one of my favorites, and then it just comes to life, and then at the end, he comes to life like and it's like, and to me, it's like, and this is her. To me, it was like, this is her doing it. This is, she did this. How? Like, why? What is it about her? And like, the only thing I can think of was like, well, Agnes, her relative, it runs in the family. Magic just runs in the family. And that's how I just kind of excused that. But that was just the only sticking point for me when it came to.
Yeah. I don't necessarily, I'm not just an air sign, I have a very heavy air chart in general, just to put that out there. But it isn't even necessarily that the magic that happened in the story, I didn't need like an explanation. I'm not like footnotes telling me why the magic worked. Like, I was more than willing to accept that the dog came to life and she was able to bless a little chick to find them somewhere to stay, and which I just thought was adorable. That was one of my favorite bits, I have to say. Find it was just adorable.
Find her trying to go up the stairs. I could just, it was so cute.
Yeah, I loved it. But and I was totally willing to suspend my disbelief and accept all of the magic. I think I wanted to see more magic so that I could have my own internal understanding of how the different magics worked. Like, there was obviously different types of magic because the Dust Wife and the Fairy Godmother have very different magic. And I just wanted to see more so that I had some kind of understanding. I don't need it. I don't necessarily need, like, if you read Sanderson, he gives you a magic system with a glossary at the back of all the different things that the magic can and can't do and how it works and why it works. And I love that, but I don't need that in every story. I like magic to feel consistent, and I like to at least believe that there are rules, even if those rules aren't necessarily explained to you in the book, that they do still exist. And I didn't really feel that with the magic. And I think I just wanted more of it. I just wanted more. More world, more magic. And actually, Laura, I think Laura makes a really good point there, because although I say I did really enjoy the pacing, there definitely were, in that respect, it would have been nice if it was a bit longer, maybe, and we could spend more time in places. But
yeah. And I totally agree. Like, under normal circumstances, like in a normal fantasy novel, I love a good magic system that's like interesting and makes sense and like uses I've always another fantasy system I really like. I don't know if you guys have ever read any of Rainbow Rowell's like Carry On books, like the way. So the Simon Snow books, like that, in that world, the magic system revolves around like cliches and sayings and how, when people repeat a phrase so many times it takes on power, like those kinds I love that kind of thing. I love when there's a magic system that's explained and makes sense. But again, I think just because this book, it didn't read like a fantasy novel to me. It just read like a fairy tale. Like I was just reading the like this highly expanded fairy tale. And I guess I was just like willing to suspend more disbelief because of that, because it was sort of, it was like, it was more about like the themes and the characters than the actual specifics of the plot, I guess. Just, you know, the way that the book was approaching the concept of a fairy tale and fairy tale archetypes, and upending the quest trope and the various tropes of all of the different characters and all that kind of stuff. Like it I guess it just didn't bother me that, you know, that sometimes we didn't really necessarily understand why things happened the way they did. It was just sort of like fairy tale, you know, that's how they go. Like, so yeah.
So Kathy is saying, I felt I could picture the world quite vividly. I was totally immersed, which, considering it was quite a short book, was quite something. Yeah, it was a short book. It was a short book.
It was short.
Marlene is saying that the tasks were totally arbitrary. It reminded me kind of the tasks Aphrodite gave. Yes, with Psyche. In the end, the tasks enhance Mara's ability to defeat the prince. I suppose that's turning the trope over. Yeah. I mean,
ultimately, Mara didn't defeat the prince, did she? Like, in the grand scheme of things, considering she's our protagonist, she made a coat, she made a bone dog, and then she went for a walk with a group of people. I mean, that's effectively what Mara did.
Yeah, she recruited all the people who actually managed to accomplish
a nice walk with a group of interesting people. She didn't really do anything.
But I guess again, it's just that to me, it's just sort of like it's the same as a fairy tale. I mean, obviously, the cloak was totally based on, you know, the 12 the Swan Princes, leaving the cloak out of Nettles, and you know, it's just like in any fairy tale or Rumpelstiltskin or whatever it might be. Like it's all about the protagonist showing that they have the determination to accomplish something. Like that's the real message. And like, no, it doesn't make sense that you have to weave shirts out of nettles and then throw them over the swans to turn them back into your brothers, right? Like why, you know? No reason other than that it challenges the protagonist. And so that I don't know, I guess it just worked fine for me, because again, it just read like a normal fairy tale. So,
and you know, as much as I love fairy tales, like one of my favorite genres, love them, that's the one thing, probably being an air sign, that was always frustrating to me in any fairy tale that I read. I'm like, well, this is fucking stupid. Why? Like, why
you have to spin strong as gold? What's your problem? Like, what?
Like, why? This is like the most arbitrary or gratuitous or just like unexplained thing ever. And like, you know, but you do get used to that being just, you know, the common kind of trait and characteristic that you're going to find in any fairy tale, that like these things just go unexplained. It's just assume that you're going to accept it because that's just how it is. And then you move on.
Yeah. Because it's more about the theme in the lesson than it is about the actual plot.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to admit, I'm not a huge fan of fairy tales. I can very much take them on. I love me a Disney film, but that's as far as it goes. Like, I can very much take them or leave them. And even when I was a kid, I've always been that kid that is like, but why though? But why are they doing that?
I did too. And yet I still love them. Even though I'd get frustrated, I would still love them. Yeah, because of just all the other fun elements, you know, like the magic and the romance and the, you know, mainly the magic. Love the magic elements, and just like the more supernatural, the more that kind of thing, for sure. Definitely made up for some of the shortcomings I felt in some of the explanations. But yeah, that definitely is mirrored, I think, in Nettle and Bone as well, that whole idea.
So go on, Sarah. Go on.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I loved fairy tales as a kid. Like I had a Grimm's fairy tales book that I just poured over, and like multiple other books of like fairy tales from like I had books of Russian fairy tales and Scandinavian fairy tales and like all this kind of, and like I always loved them, and I loved them the creepier they were and the less sense they made. Like again, there for the vibes, just there for the vibes, you know. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So if you had to pick a favorite and a least favorite character, excluding the animals
and the prince, I'm assuming we would all say that our least
and the
favorite
prince,
I mean,
yeah.
Early.
Who would you pick, Julie?
Oh my gosh, it would have to be a tie between Agnes and Dustwife. I like those two are just like the dynamic duo. I really just love them so much, like just everything about them, and especially like with Agnes, we come into meeting her with this expectation that, or at least it's kind of set up in my mind. It was set up because there's this frustration that Mara has with Agnes, the fairy godmother, having blessed them with good health, and like, wow, that's a bunch of BS. Like, what, this is the blessing that you're going to bestow on the family. And so like Mara is ready to be upset with the Dustwife, or with Agnes, and so thereby I was ready to be upset with Agnes, ready to kind of cast her off as just a silly godmother, or one who didn't know what she was doing, or I was ready to side with Mara. And then you come to find out why she is only able to bless people with good health, and she's just so sweet and nice, and it's like, I mean, that was so well played, in my opinion. That was so well played and well written, just well done. But I would say it is like those two were they were amazing. I loved the kind of dry humor of the Dustwife, and then just those two playing off of each other, because you've got Dustwife, which is just very kind of sardonic and dry, and then you've got Agnes, who's just so sweet. She's just such a darling.
She's so kind and earnest.
So kind. And she's just so, and the way they play off each other, just that was by far like a huge highlight for me in the book. So it's a tie. I know.
Who's your least favorite?
Like in the Misfit group, or just in general? I mean,
in general, but not the prince.
Okay. I mean, okay. Well, I mean, I would say, like I said, like Mara, like she's just okay, but like not really engaging for me. Like I just was so much more enamored with others. But, and like, what was her name? What was the sister's name?
Kanya.
She doesn't even say thank you. What the hell? Like this gang comes to like save her, and she gets saved. And granted, she is able to in the end save Fenris and whatever, and you do get the sense that perhaps she is thankful that her sister came all this way with this group to like basically save her from a life of who knows what. We didn't even hear a thank you. That's just a very little thing. I know I'm being nitpicky, but I was waiting. I was waiting for some acknowledgement there, and I mean, I guess it came in other ways that were shown more than told. Fine, but ultimately, it's very interesting because she, in the beginning, at least the way Mara paints her, she just wasn't a great sister. She was not the kindest, and even at the end, you get this. I mean, and maybe that was Mara's perception of the way her sister was, and I guess Kanya did warn Mara about the prince, so that was sisterly. I don't know. Like, but then again, she was more of a minor character, I suppose. So she's.
I will say that there was a quote at the end. Now I don't know if I have it, but there was a quote at the end where it actually talks about like after they kill the prince and seeing Kanya just like take over, like in that moment, know what to do and take over as queen, like instantly, and like. And it was a sentence where it just talked about like Mara sort of like recasting her whole understanding of who Kanya had been in that moment, because she basically spent her whole life like being trained to be this, and Mara was, as the third sister, was always the one who was sort of like, she never had a job, basically. Like Mara never was like really raised to see being a princess as like her job, as opposed to the other two older sisters who were probably always going to get married off to somebody or other. And and so and I really liked that because I do think like I don't think Kanya was a bad person. I think she'd just been through the shit, you know, like, and she had accepted it, stoically dealt with it like the entire time because she knew that she was saving lives by doing it, and like that was her role. And so I did like that they at least eventually sort of showed Mara, even though she'd always had a difficult relationship with her sister, like sort of gaining a new understanding of her.
I agree. I did like that as well. Yeah, I did. I agree that I don't think Kanya was like a bad person. Like you know, she could have very well been once again cast as that like evil sister, you know, that and I never got that vibe actually. I just got this, but I mean, in terms of least favorite, maybe I guess it would. Yeah, maybe have to be it for me, like because the rest were fine. Other than the prince.
Yeah. I liked Kanya. I thought she was a good character. I liked her. I probably liked her a little bit. I certainly found her more interesting than Mara personally.
She was more interesting than Mara. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
But I think it's really hard because like the Agnes and the Dustwife again are probably my favorites, but I think Agnes just beats it out for me. I love that she's like, she has the power, like she has the potential to be so powerful. Like she's very good at cursing, but because she wants to be nice, she does like this weak ass blessing and the only thing she can get to take is good health, which is basically nothing. It's like you're giving somebody nothing. Well done. And it's just she's so, and that's one thing I really did like about the characters, and like we've been talking about throughout, is that, you know, in fairy tales characters are often the goody or the baddie. They're good or they're evil. And I love that she was born to be evil, but was like, no, fuck that. I want to be nice, and I want to have a garden, and I want to raise animals and and just bless children, but I'm not very good at it, so I'm just going to wish them good health and go on my way. I really, really liked it, and I loved like Finder and how he just used to sit in her bosom and and so it was just so cute.
But then the Dustwife was like, she was like, you're gonna end up with a grown-ass rooster who just like goes into your boobs every time.
Yeah, I did love that. And the Dustwife reminded me a lot of Granny Weatherwax from Terry Pratchett. Do you read Terry Pratchett at all? Oh, she was very, very like Granny Weatherwax from Terry Pratchett, and Granny Weatherwax is a fantastic character. She's probably one of Terry Pratchett's best characters. And so I liked that as well. I liked being able to see elements of that in this character. For me, I just really enjoyed that. I think I didn't dislike any of the characters other than the prince. Obviously, but I cannot even remember his name. What was his name?
Who, the prince?
No, the other guy.
Fenris.
Yeah. I kind of found him a bit dull, if I'm completely honest. Oh, well, him and Mara, I think, and it was like you had these.
They went so well together.
Maybe you had these two really fun, engaging, interesting characters, and then these two not very fun, interesting, engaging characters. And it's not even. I don't know. I liked his story. I thought that was well done, and. Yeah, I didn't dislike him. I just found him a bit dull.
Yeah. So Kathy is saying, wasn't a big fan of Mom. I have to agree as well. I actually forgot about her because you don't see all that much of her, but like now I would amend my answer to agree with Kathy.
I see, even the mom, I didn't dislike the mom. I totally got where she was coming from. Like it's that difficult thing of, she's not just the mother, she's the queen of an entire kingdom, and she was trying to save her kingdom. and doing what she thought was the right thing to do.
The sacrifice of
With
her daughter.
the only chip that she had to play were her daughters. That was it. She had nothing else.
Which is hard because knowing what her daughter was, I mean, she knew her daughter was being abused. Like, she knew her daughter was being hurt. She knew her first daughter was murdered. So I find that to be a bit hard to, even with, I do understand the duty of being a queen and all that comes with that. And that did get my back up a little bit, not gonna lie. Like, she just, so yeah.
Yeah.
I understand. Get it.
Their entire kingdom would have been invaded and destroyed and overrun, you know, like, which is why Kanya, despite knowing what had, you know, despite knowing like that things were probably not necessarily going to go well for her, still went willingly and married that guy. You know, I think it was, in a way, it was interesting because it did sort of, it did show that, you know, and again, upending fairy tale tropes, right? Like, being royalty isn't all like dancing and balls, shoes and dresses. You know, being royalty means you're a leader of a whole lot of people, and you might end up, in all likelihood, you are going to be the one making giant sacrifices in order to ensure the well-being of all of the kingdom that you are a leader of, and so yeah, I guess I mean, it made sense to me. Like, I understood the utilitarian calculation that the mom was making. It was like, okay, either I marry my daughters off to this crazy guy, or he rolls in with his giant army and crushes all of us. You know, like that. Those were my options. Like, so, you know, so I get it. Like, it made sense to me. Yeah. Anyway.
So Marlene is saying the mom was my least favorite, supposedly sacrificing her children to save the lives of the people of the kingdom, but oof, didn't really read as honorable. Yeah.
Kingdom schmingdom.
I hear ya.
Yeah, I mean, Mara was like, I don't know. Mara was interesting in the fact that she just wasn't, even though the story is her story. She's the protagonist, and yet she actually probably is the least involved.
Like, yeah, I agree.
And the least, I don't know. I thought all of the characters, I have to say though, in terms of characterization, I thought every single character was well developed. There was not a single character that felt like just a throwaway. Everyone felt three-dimensional, which I really, really do like. And even to the point, you know, where we're having these conversations, the fact that we can have these conversations about, you know, where do we stand with the mom and that kind of stuff, I think just goes to show how well the characters were written. But
yeah,
and I like gray characters. I like it when it's not quite so clear cut as these are the goodies and these are the baddies. Because even like if you drew right down to it, but again, it was a fairy tale and this is how fairy tales work. But their whole plan was like, let's just murder the prince. They never considered another option, not once. It was like, we're the good guys, let's go murder the prince. Yeah. Okay, cool.
To Laura's point, I actually really like that. I really like that. It was just,
wow. You know, that's the thing. For as kind of like unengaging as I found Mara, that was the thing where I was like, yes, badass, let's do it. Like, that's like that made her.
She wasn't fucking around. She was like, this dude's hurting my sister. I'm gonna go cut his throat. I don't care. Like, all I gotta do is find people to help me out, because obviously I can't just waltz in there and cut his throat. But like, you know,
non-princess.
Maybe I can find some people who can just waltz in there and cut his throat.
She meets though, she's like, well, I'm gonna go whether or not you come with. Like, you know, if you want to do this good thing, like, come with me. But like, regardless, like, I'm still doing it. You know, like she wasn't messing around.
No,
so,
she wasn't. No, for sure.
Yeah.
which is so funny because she was like a nun practically. And it's like, yes, I'm a nun. I just
Mhm.
go commit murder.
She wasn't a nun, though. She
No,
was
she
very,
wasn't.
very
She wasn't.
specific about the fact that she was
No,
not
she
a
wasn't.
nun. She
She did.
definitely was not a nun. She was
No.
shagging one of the
She
guys.
was, but correct.
She was
She was,
definitely not a nun.
no, you're right. You're right. She wasn't a nun. She just lived with the
She was
nuns.
just living in a nunnery.
Living in the nuns, dressing
Right.
like a nun.
Although I think it was Marlena who pointed out maybe that she also loved the Sister Apothecary. Like the nuns were actually extremely awesome. Like
Yeah, the nuns were awesome.
The nuns had a lot more, you know, the nuns were a lot more realistic about the world that they were living in than a lot of people in that book. And again, just to pull out one of my favorite quotes, there's one of the quotes was, maybe some of the saints were like that too, cranky old women with strange gifts. And I was like, yes, yes, give me all the cranky old women with strange gifts, because that is what I love. And that is why I loved the Dust Wife and I loved Agnes. And although Agnes wasn't quite as cranky, but like, yeah, that's why I really like those characters. So
Cool.
Sarah, did you list a favorite and a least favorite? I don't think you.
No, I didn't.
No, you didn't.
So I mean, I would agree. I loved Agnes and the Dust Wife. I actually I don't know. It's really hard for me to say that I had a least favorite character. I mean, I get the point. I get the point that, you know, when you compare them to Agnes and the Dust Wife, that Mara and Fenris probably weren't like as colorful as characters, but I mean, I genuinely cared about both of them. Like, and I definitely, you know, I was invested in their relationship with each other. So yeah, I don't know. I think I didn't really have probably like a least favorite unless you like forced me. But I thought all the characters were like really well done, well drawn. I enjoyed all of them. So yeah.
Okay.
Cool. So I think that's pretty much everything, other than, would you read from T. Kingfisher again, or have you? I guess is a good question that people are already discussing in the chat, whether they would read from her again or not.
I agree. I would like to read more, just because I do like her narrative style a lot, and I think she's I mean, you know, Nettle and Bone was a creative novel. It really was. There was a ton of creativity there, in my opinion. So, you know, while yeah, I found some things problematic, or, you know, just maybe not as exciting or whatever, or engaging, I on the whole found it to be just really well written, really creative. I liked what it was trying to do. I liked all the, you know, the characters were, again, yeah, well rounded, well developed, and I would read something else by her. I love that she writes standalone stories.
Not all of them, not all the time.
Not all of them are, but like so she has a couple other that are standalone.
She does. Yeah. She does.
I love that. I love that. Give me more standalone novels. So yeah, definitely.
I have read from T. Kingfisher before. I think I said at the beginning, and I definitely would read from her again. One of the things I like about T. Kingfisher is that she is not although she writes genre stories, she's not a genre author, in that she's not a fantasy writer or a fairy tale writer. She's written horror, she's written fairy tales, she's written fantasy, she's written, I think one of her, there's one, like The Clockwork Boys, I think is a steampunk duology. Like she very much plays around with genres and likes to do exactly what she's done with this, and, you know, and play with the genres and its usual tropes and stuff. And I like that. I like seeing authors do fun and unusual things with the different genres that they write in. So I definitely will. I've actually got Sword Heart, I think, as an audiobook, so I may even do that one very soon.
Cool.
Yeah, I did. The other T. Kingfisher that I've read is is House with Good Bones, which I audio read, and I talked a little. That was the one where the narrator of the audiobook made a love interest sound like Huckleberry Hound. Like that was
yes, I remember. Yeah.
which really kind of impeded my enjoyment of the book overall. But I will say that book, that, you know, I liked Nettle and Bone a lot more than that book. I felt like that book, it had a really, really good beginning, and then towards the end, it just sort of like went off the rails, I feel like. But I do like the writing style, and so I will probably read more that T. Kingfisher has written. But you know, I will say that of the two I've read so far, Nettle and Bone was definitely my favorite. But and there were just like, I'm just like looking through, because I, you know, since I read on an e-reader, I like highlight stuff all of the time, and then I can go back and like look at what all my highlights were. And I like highlighted so many lines from that book that were just like funny or thought-provoking, or like I actually really, I really, really enjoyed the writing, and I really felt like it had just like a lot of just fun tidbits that as I was reading, I was like, oh, that, you know, I like the way she put that, or I really like, I like the way that thought about the theme of the book, or I really, you know, there was just a lot of goodness in it. I really, really enjoyed it. So, yeah, it was, and the Dust Wife was hilarious. I'm just like looking back and remembering that, you know, when Fenris showed up, one of the first things she says is, you know, we need him to stick around because it might turn out that our fate is sealed inside a jar and we need someone to loosen the lid. I like lost it when I read that, because it's like, yes, we need a guy around just to open jars. Right? Like, that was hilarious. I mean, I don't know. It was just, yeah. So I do thoroughly enjoy the writing style. I enjoyed the humor, and I really liked it a lot. So
I have a question. What did you all think about the climax? The how Prince Vorling was in fact murdered, like how that all played out. What do you guys think?
I mean, it ended up just, again, I think this is like upending fairy tale tropes in a lot of ways. Like, it ended up just being like Agnes was a distraction and Fenris just fucking stabbed him, you know? Like,
well, she cursed him, didn't she? She basically cursed the baby to grow up without a father.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, and meanwhile, Fenris is like sneaking along the wall,
sneaking around the back,
and just you know, stabs him. And that was like, yeah, okay, again, cool. You know, it didn't. I don't know. To me, it worked fine, because it again just sort of like, you know, it I don't know, it felt more down to earth than what you would normally expect from fantasy. So
yeah, I liked it. I thought it all came together really well. I think it didn't feel out of step with the rest of the story. Like, it didn't suddenly do something really random that made you go, well, that makes no sense in context of what I've just been reading for the last however many pages, but okay. I also thought, like, again, it was, if I sit back and think about some of the end, I'm like, they buried a guy alive in a coffin. That's really freaking dark, man. And yet it was all so gentle in the tone that it was written in. I don't know. That was difficult for me because I have really severe claustrophobia. So once we got to that bit, I was like, oh, this is getting hard to read. But I liked it. I thought it worked well. I thought it fit with the overall tone of the story. And, you know, they like I say, they never intended to do anything else. Their plan from day one was figure out how to get in that castle and murder him.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Wheel of Souls and Tombs was crazy.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yep. The Thief's Wheel.
How did you feel about the ending, Julie? What's the answer to your own question?
I also liked it. I mean, I will say initially when I read it, I'm like, that was so fast. That happened so, and again, I think that's the thing where I like the pacing for me. It was just kind of like parts were slow and then parts were, so it was just kind of, but then again, knowing what it turned out to be, which is again, just the vibe of it is not meant to be ramped up. The vibe of it is meant to be just a more even keeled pacing. Then that to me was just like, I guess I was expecting more intensity of it just because that's what I'm used to. And so it doesn't surprise me. And then when I gave it more thought, that's why I ended up liking it, because again, it's upsetting my expectations. I'm expecting a more ramped up, maybe more drawn out climax and wanting more from this prince's murder, and ultimately it's like I'm like, oh, okay.
He's surprised. He looks down and there's a sword sticking out of him.
He's like, what?
We're done already. Okay, all right then. Like,
I mean, it felt very true to life in that it was like they spent this whole story like, how are we going to do it? It's going to be this really complicated thing, and we're going to be in so much danger and blah 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 blah. And it's like life, isn't it? It's like that you build up that expectation of a thing so much, and then when you actually come to do the thing, it's like 2 minutes later you're like, oh, the thing is done. Was that it? The build up to the thing was more stressful than doing the thing.
Exactly.
And that felt very real, actually, in some ways.
Yeah. And I especially, I think my actually favorite part, I mean, yay, great, the prince was dead. That's fantastic and all. But like, I think my favorite part was, once again, Agnes. I just loved Agnes and how she came in there and like, her serving as a distraction and making herself look like 6 feet tall and just this formidable fairy godmother, when in fact she's just a sweet, sweet lady. And then she's just like, grabbing her skirts and like just traipsing out of the,
way. Exactly. And then later they talk about how, she doesn't even need to disguise herself as they escape, because everybody remembers her as a gigantic woman with glowing green eyes, and like would never associate Agnes with what they saw in the throne room.
Exactly. So once again, that to me was like probably my favorite part of the climax, actually. So yeah.
All right, awesome. So just one more question from Marlena then, I guess, unless anybody has anything else about Nettle and Bone they want to say. No?
One. Ooh.
So are we going to do another one?
What book?
Yeah, I was just going to ask the chat if you guys have any suggestions for
do you have any suggestions of what you would want us to read?
Oh, dead air.
Yeah, we'll need to give it some. I mean, I'd be happy to do another one, but
I'd definitely be happy to do it again. I'm always happy to talk about books with people. I'm desperate to talk about books with people half the time.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. We have a long TBR list.
Okay, so
it's egregious how long my list is.
Well, are you talking about physical TBR list or like
aspirational
aspirational one? Because physical TBR list, I don't have a TBR list. I have a whole bookcase right here with like 70 books on it, and that's not including the 50 odd on my Kindle, and that's also not including the aspirational books that I have on my Goodreads. So yeah, my list is quite long.
It's always long. It's always long.
Quite long.
I'm counting like Kindle. I don't really have many prints, so would be probably Kindle audio book. But yeah, it's pretty egregious. But it's always been that way. It'll always be that way. So it's.
Yeah.
We need to think about what we could read next that is something that we all want to read that none of us has read.
Yeah, and if you have any suggestions, please do, like watching the playback of this, or you can drop it in the comments. You can email us, like however you want to make your suggestions. We'd love to get some.
I'm literally just like flipping through my haven't read yet on my Kindle just to see what I've got going on. So, but yeah.
I think we've got some good overlap in terms of taste. So I don't think it will be too difficult to find a book that we're all at least interested in reading.
I agree. Yeah.
So yeah, definitely we will do this again. I've had a really good time. I don't know about you two ladies, but I've actually had a really good time.
Yeah.
Totally.
So,
Absolutely. It's
I'm
fun to talk
always up for book chat.
about.
Always.
Love it. Okay. Yeah. I'm nothing is jumping out to me as I flip through stuff, but we'll give it some thought and see if we can come up with something. So
Absolutely. All right.
Okay.
Cool.
Cool. So we are back on Saturday, the 13th of July, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
wait, Marlena, what book did you just read?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. You mentioned something and now I'm like, huh?
I know. Please let us know.
Mhm.
Yeah. What is that bookmark? Yes, it is the 13th. You are right.
Yeah, July 13th.
13th. And we're on Julie's channel, I believe.
Yes.
On the 13th. Yeah.
Mhm.
Cool. Now no one's going anywhere until Marlena tells us.
We're waiting.
Waiting. Come on.
Oh, Normal People. Yes.
Oh,
I don't
Normal
want to read
People.
that book. Sorry,
Yeah.
I have no interest in reading. Normal
I never
People by
read
Sally
it.
Rooney.
Is that the one where they made that mini series, the limited series out of?
I've seen
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've seen that. I haven't read it, but I've
Mhm.
seen it.
Mhm.
yeah. I'm afraid literary fiction is not my thing, so
Mhm.
I don't think I'll enjoy that book, and I don't want to read it.
Okay,
Fair enough.
fair enough. Okay. We'll see what you can come up with. No worries. No worries. There's got to be
All right,
something.
well, yeah, for sure. Just drop a comment or let us know. You know where we are. You know how to find us. So
Yeah,
very cool.
Cool. All right.
All right, lovely. I don't know how to do the end card, so I don't know.
I'll do it.
I don't know how to do anything.
Here we are.
Yay.
Thanks, everybody. It was really fun.
Bye.
Thanks all.
Thank you.